I'm delighted to introduce to you Laura Charlesworth. Laura is from an organisation called New Local, and New Local is an independent think tank and network that sets out to transform public services and unlock community power. And I'm sure Laura will say a bit more about the organisation in her presentation, which is about community-powered care. So without further ado, if I can ask you to switch off your cameras and make sure you're on mute, and I'm going to hand over to Laura for the next 20 minutes.
Thank you, Sue. And I am first up with the technical wizardry or lack of. So let me try and share my screen with you and we will see how we go. So let me make that into full presentation, share. Okay, can somebody just let me know that you can see that? If you just pop your microphone off and say yes, that'd be really handy because I can't see you all now.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and absolutely delighted to be here and joining you this afternoon to talk to you a little bit about what we talk about as community power, and to get you to kind of think about this in the context of your own roles and your own selves, in fact. I just very quickly sort of introduce who I am. So I've been at New Local since October last year, and I'll talk a bit more briefly about our work in a moment. Prior to that, I worked as an associate professor at a university with a role across the allied health professions, and I've got a background in health. So longer ago than I would care to share with you, I was a radiographer, a therapeutic radiographer, and I've done lots of work kind of in health and in public health, and I'm really interested and passionate about kind of health inequalities and levelling up and all of that stuff, which is how I've ended up finding myself here today. Before I kind of really start to talk to you about the detail, just give you a little bit of a headline around New Local. So we are a think tank. I don't know if there's any other think tanks in the room, but I don't like to describe ourselves as a think tank because we do lots of things that are unconventional for think tanks. And just briefly, I would describe our work as kind of having three kind of core categories. The first is that we have a network. So our network is mostly made up of councils. And I think I might have spied on the list today that there might be at least one or two in the room who are New Local members. And we service our membership through lots of different events and peer learning, etc., etc. I won't go into that in too much detail. The second area of our work, or big area of our work, is around practice. So we work with different organisations on different elements of community power. That could be, an example is we recently worked with Islington in London to do some work on tackling health inequalities for them. But we do all sorts. We could do some work on leadership. We do some work on organisational culture, for example. And then the third area of our portfolio is policy and research, and that is where I sit, and doing lots of different pieces of work at the moment around community-powered health and care to kind of create a growing evidence base for this, what's working effectively, where are we demonstrating good practice, and really important to me is what's the impact, what is the so what of that. And so if you kind of keep up to date with our website, you'll see kind of lots of the different bits and pieces. And if anybody's interested in any one of those categories or otherwise, please just get in touch. Very happy to have a chat with you afterwards or send you some bits and pieces. So I want to get started. And the first thing I'm going to do, and this is slightly brave because now that I've looked at the range of people in the room and the range of different organisations and roles that you might have, I've edited this very slightly. I wanted to start by giving you all a minute or two, which is a dreadful thing to do in a virtual room because the time goes very slowly when it's silent. But I'd love to just get you to think about your place, where you live, where you work, services that you provide for, populations that you care for or provide a service for or otherwise. However you want to define what your place is, whether that's about you as a person or you as a professional or a bit of both, maybe both of those two things together. I want you to just have a minute or two to think about what would your vision be, or what is your vision for your place? What might it look like if you could make some changes? And I just want you to have a think about that for a minute, and then I'm not going to ask you to share that, so please don't feel pressure to write it down or anything, but just hold that in your head then as I kind of talk through the next few slides. So I'm going to give you a minute and a half, and I'm going to sit in silence, which is very difficult for me, but I'm going to do it, and here we go. Okay, I'm going to ask you to draw your thinking there to a conclusion, and either just, like I say, hold that thought in your mind, or if you've noted it on paper, brilliant. And just keep that in your mind as we go through the rest of the presentation. I'm going to revisit that when I get to the end. Okay, so Sue really kindly introduced that I would be talking about community power, and that was the title of my first slide. And so it's helpful, hopefully, for me to give you a bit of context around what do we mean by community power. There'll be some of you in the room who are really familiar with this term, who might use it in your own experience. Others, it might be a term that's new, but hopefully when I explain what we mean by this, it won't be a new concept for you. So by community power, we really mean thinking about acknowledging that the people, the communities in which they live are actually more valuable, perhaps, and have their own set of insights into their own set of circumstances and the conditions that they need to thrive. I think since I've been in this role, what I'm learning more and more is that communities are also really brilliant at finding their own solutions. Sometimes those solutions are very creative and innovative, and that is a really important component of bringing communities together. And often those solutions are not solutions that we would necessarily think of if we were part of an organisational institution sitting together around a table thinking about a solution to a big problem, which I have done in the past without any true community participation. And what we come up with is very different to what we would come up with had our communities been involved. I suppose, if I think about community power as being on a sort of a spectrum, if you will, where actually it might start kind of at this end with community listening and thinking about how do we find ways to find out what's happening to our communities. And if I'm talking about that from the perspective of health and care, which is my agenda, then I would perhaps want to look at some data that I might be able to access through various different means. But I'd also want to couple that with some community listening activities, some qualitative data that helps me to marry up, okay, well, this is what the data is telling me about my populations, but this is their lived experience and what they're actually experiencing in their lives. And putting those two things together, I think, is really powerful. So that's kind of at one end, all the way up to the other end, where actually we're handing over responsibility or greater responsibility and power and control and resource, which sometimes sounds really quite scary if we're over here on this journey, to our communities. And that is what we mean when we talk about community power. And there's all kinds of different elements that sit under that term. We can talk about the presentation that I was just at before I came here. I was talking about co-production and etc. But that's really what we mean. So it's about handing over power, however we describe that, and also recognising and really valuing in equal measure the contributions of our communities. And so at the heart of all of the work that we do at New Local is all focused on community power and bringing this to reality. And we work with lots of brilliant partners and councils and increasingly health and care services who are doing more and more of this and who are aspiring to be able to do more and more of this. I do just want to note here, because this comes up a lot in the work that I do now, around how do we describe a community. And so for the purpose of the work that we do at New Local, there's a couple of reports that I'll mention today, the first of which is the community paradigm, which I'll make reference to again later. We describe a community as any network of individuals collaborating more or less formally to achieve a shared socially beneficial goal. That can be a community defined by geography, it can be a community defined by interest or otherwise. And you'll all have differing views on that as well. I spend a lot of time debating what is and isn't a community and what is and isn't a population, and it gets quite complex. So that was the what about community power. Next, I want to kind of give you some of the why. So I'm going to pop all of these up on the slide so that you can see them. The first is that we know that communities who have greater empowerment and who are happier and more engaged, also there's a growing evidence base to show us that they're healthier. And if we're talking about some of the kind of key political issues at the moment, service demand, health service demand and acute pressures are right up there in terms of what's kind of coming out as being really key. And those of you in the room who are working across those sectors will probably agree with that. We know that kind of through community-led approaches, we're starting to see some real value in how practitioners are recognising that people being active participants in their own health and care actually allows us really to embed preventative approaches and embed early interventions. and often that can lead to reduced service demand. So it is a really key element when we're thinking about how we kind of might pioneer different approaches to service design, thinking about embedding communities. The second is that that sort of improved health and well-being goes beyond just the kind of prevention versus acute pressures, which is one example. And the best way that I can reference this improved health and well-being is if we think about, and I'm sorry to take us back to this because we're only just getting to the point of moving slightly on, is COVID. And I use this example often because there are some absolutely brilliant examples of community engagement and community activation around the COVID-19 response, from all kinds of things. Like the area that I live, somebody came around and posted little pieces of paper through the door. Let's not think about infection control of that right now. But talking, you know, do you need anything? You know, here's an email address if you need anything, if I can kind of bring you anything. Like, just never happened before in the area that I live, from vaccine responses to all kinds of different things. And I find that quite incredible, given that we didn't really prepare our communities for that, right? And imagine the impact if we did. So I just think it's such a great example to draw on. And you know, there are some papers out there around the impacts of communities being prepared and then acting as respondees to pandemics, and I'm fairly confident that we will be preparing and continuing to do that in the future. The third reason why community power, and this hopefully is of interest to those of you in the room who are from local government or who are elected members, is around the increase in how an increase in democratic participation can actually increase satisfaction. It can build trust in decisions that are made locally, even if we're not necessarily collaborating and co-producing with a community on a particular topic. We know that it can build that sort of greater trust in the decisions that are made in an area. And that's really important. It builds that legitimacy and can really help to sort of strengthen the relationships between local councils, elected members, other public services in that area and the communities. And that helps us to tackle some of the really, really complex challenges. I don't know if there's anyone in the room who's kind of working on climate change, but I think this is when we're thinking about the approach that might be needed to take to tackle climate change, I think this is a really great example of thinking about how all the different key stakeholders can collaborate effectively once that trust is being built. Financial savings. I'm always slightly nervous about referencing this in presentations because it's actually pretty tricky to prove. But we are starting to see that through community-powered approaches, financial savings are a potential. Those of you in the room who've worked in prevention or public health know that it's so difficult to build the case for the return on investment for that, even though we know that it's there. But we're starting to see that, and there's a couple of examples, one of which I'll share with you, which is about the Wigan deal. So some of you may have heard about the Wigan deal already. If not, I'd really encourage you to have a little look at that. And what the Wigan deal does is it shows us that through sort of a whole systems approach to tackling the health of a particular area, we actually saw an increase in life expectancy as one of the outcomes from the Wigan deal, but there were also financial implications. So please do have a read of that. The King's Fund have got some papers on the Wigan deal, and if you just have a good old search in the recommended search engines, we all find some stuff on that, and I think it makes for a really good read. And then finally, I would say, why community power? Well, one would hope that everyone agrees it's a basic right, that as a citizen in an area, as part of a community, that I have the opportunity to be involved in decisions that are made that are going to affect my life. And that is where I'll kind of finish with that why slide. There's plenty of other things that we could put in here, but hopefully that's just helped to kind of build a bit of a case. Next, I want to take us through what we describe as our sort of 3 routes to community power. Again, this isn't exhaustive. This is just sort of 3 kind of key categories where I'm hoping here that I can get you to kind of be reflecting on your roles and the areas in which you work and how you might play a role in sort of driving this agenda forward. The first is when we talk about strategic decision making. And so I've already sort of given some examples here about this. So what we often find is that when there are decisions to be made about a particular area, that often communities are brought in as a necessity to consult on. And we do that and we ask some questions about what you would think about X, Y, and Z. but quite often the decision has already been made about something, or we're at the point where we've got sort of 2 or 3 decisions to choose from. And if I can give you a real example of this from the last role that I was in before I came into post here, where we were looking at changing the where diagnostic services were being delivered, and we wanted to put the diagnostic services in the community to make access much easier. So a group of us were kind of looked at a few different sites, we decided on a site, and then we brought the community in and said, what do you think of this location for where you might come and have some diagnostic services? And actually what we should have done is it started way back earlier on and said, actually, we're thinking about locating some diagnostic services outside of the NHS hospital. What do you think about that, before we've even decided on where it's going and how it's happening? So really, really key. And there's lots of different things to consider here. The timelines are quite complex, sometimes involving communities and really truly co-producing and making decisions that are equal, and the opportunities for deliberation, etc., can be quite lengthy, and sometimes we all know we're working on much shorter timelines to that. So there's definitely tensions there, but I would encourage you just to think about, are there opportunities where you could do more of this, and you could start to, you know, open up these conversations if you're not already doing this, and try and sort of move that along, even just some way, rather than consulting once decisions have pretty much already been made. The second area is thinking about strengths-based delivery, and by this what we really mean is that genuine acknowledgement that the community itself is a strength. Thinking about them holistically and all of the things that are going on that are potentially very complex in their sets of circumstances, but really appreciating that brings their whole set of expertise and they understand that much better than we do, and you know, really being able to draw on that and using that to think about designing, delivering and providing services that are meaningful to the people who are going to be using them. And again, I could really unpack that, but not too much time today. And then the third and final route to community power is thinking about our organisational and community culture. Lots and lots that we could talk about here in terms of what is our capability for this. And I think about reflecting on my own practice here as a health professional. At no point in any of my training or placements or anything did I ever have conversations about people being participants in their own care. I asked my husband the other day, who works in oncology, what does he know about his population that his department serves, and he just looked very blankly at me, and what opportunities are there? You know, there's lots more that we could do because we're strategically as organisations not necessarily set up to have that voice, the community voice, in parity with the voice of the professionals in the room, and that's kind of what we're really working to. The second is thinking about our organisational culture for community engagement, involvement, community power, and what is our readiness for that? So what skills are needed to really truly actively listen to communities, to engage communities before we can even listen? How do we actually engage them properly, especially those that are seldom heard? And if we're thinking about health inequalities and addressing some of the health inequalities, often we're completely missing some of the groups that we need to, and we describe that as being they're hard to reach, but I much prefer the term they're seldom heard, which somebody put to me a couple of months ago. So there might be particular components for you of this where you're thinking, okay, well, how could we do more about organisational capability, our engagement skills, our listening skills, the opportunities that we've got to have and to create in order to do more of this? And, you know, how do we start to shift that culture so that communities are really central to all the decisions that as many of the decisions that we're making as possible? I just want to quickly run through a couple of kind of key factors. So we need to think about handing over real power and resource is actually quite tricky and difficult, and sometimes communities don't want that, and there's a tension there. And again, this goes right back to, if we've got engagement and we're listening, we can understand that, we can build trust, and we can think about what that looks like over a period of time. Time is mentioned because it takes time, and often we're grappling with, here's a project, go and do some co-production, and you've got 3 months to deliver that before the funding runs out. But actually it can take 3 months to even think about who you're engaging in your co-production and what on earth you're actually co-producing. So again, there's another tension there. I've just mentioned the capability building side of things. And then finally, just on organisational readiness, I would just say that what we find is that sometimes when we're trying to engage with communities, they might want to talk to us initially about something that we weren't planning on talking to them about. So if I want to engage my community about diagnostic services, they're very angry about the lack or the cost of car parking somewhere. Sometimes we've got to be ready to think about how are we responding to what our communities bring to us. And again, that comes back as a bit of a challenge. Last couple of slides from me. I just want to talk to you about how we apply all of that in the context of health and care systems. The principles of all of those things are what we're talking about here. What we know is that learning from and co-producing with our communities really often means recasting the relationships that we've got as health and care providers with our communities. I know that there are really great pockets of good practice, but I would say that system-wide, we don't have a community-powered health and care system at the moment. So we need to move away from this kind of seeing people as passive recipients of health and care and actually seeing them as being really valuable and having their own insights and helping us to think about the solutions to that. And there's growing evidence that shows us that community participation in their decision making is helpful and valuable, and I've already given you some examples of that. And in the report that you can see on the screen, there's a whole host of real case studies that you can have a look through that will talk you through this a bit more. So to achieve this, we need to give opportunities for communities to have more participation in decision making. So think about those of you working in health and care and thinking about opportunities that you've got to create spaces to listen to your communities and help and allow them to be part of that decision making. The second is that we need to think about where are there already really great initiatives that are happening in the community where communities are engaged, drawing on the assets that our communities already have as an opportunity to mobilise them further. And then the third is about thinking about our organisational culture and how do we support our organisations to really kind of move into this community focused approach. This is my favourite bit of that report that I've just shared, and I would really love you to have a look at this and to think about how you can do this stuff that I've just been talking about in practice based on this sort of growing evidence space. Before I just kind of make reference to what this is, I will just quickly talk through what I mean by state, market and community paradigm, because that will hopefully set the scene, and apologies to those of you who already understand this already. So when we talk about the state paradigm, we're talking about the dominant paradigm which came about in the 1940s, very much instilling a hierarchy, very much seeing people as passive recipients of their own care. We then moved in sort of the 1980s into this sort of market paradigm, which was very much around what I would describe as like a consumer model. So the people receiving health and care are customers of their own, are customers of our services, and we become very target driven, very driven by efficiencies and costs, etc. What we would love to move to is this community paradigm. This is kind of the dream, and we're seeing this more and more. And what we're doing in the community paradigm is, as a dominant paradigm, is we're seeing that people bring their own assets and values and insights into that, and they're active participants in their own health and care. And have a look at this once the slides are circulated. The column on the left-hand side kind of gives you the category and what it looks like in practice in each of these paradigms. And I would encourage you to use, I really like using this table as like a self-reflection piece where you can kind of go, okay, so if I was looking at the view of communities, for example, so sort of the fifth row down, are my communities equal partners with deep insight, and are they contributing to the response, effective service response? So if I'm thinking about acute pressures in health and care at the moment, are we bringing our communities into the conversation about finding the solutions to that? So you can kind of go through this table and do that in relation to your own area of work, health and care, or more widely, and think about where you can start to kind of drive some change. So last slide, and I'll just give you a minute for this because I think I've gone slightly over time. And that's thinking right back to what I asked you to do at the beginning, which is thinking about the vision for your place, your area, your community, the services that you support and work with. What would that look like if you could lead some change? And so now I just want you to have a moment to think, okay, well, all of the things I've just heard about community power, what might my one action be that I can take from what I've just heard to think about how I can contribute to achieving that vision for my place? And I'll give you a minute to think about that, and then I'll just say goodbye, and I'll leave you with that thought. So another minute's silence, which is off we go. Okay, I'll break that silence. That's all I'm comfortable with. I'm going to pop the link to the community powered health report in the chat, and that table that I've just shared and some of the examples that I briefly mentioned will all be in there. So please do have a look through that, and please do get in touch if you've got any questions. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Sue.
I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, who will be familiar to many of you in the room, I'm sure, Donna Coyle. Donna is with Compass, formerly and perhaps still better known as Wales Cooperative Centre, but was rebranded recently. And Donna is the Cooperative Care and Support Project Manager, and has been working for a long time on Welsh Government projects. And we're delighted to be working with Donna and the team on a programme of work at the moment called Preseli Cares, which I think Donna might mention in her presentation. So, okay, over to you, Donna, as the first of our two speakers on what this looks like on the ground, I guess, and your experiences and learning to date. Thank you.
Diolch. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, everybody. Now, a colleague is going to share my slides. I'm going to say next slide, please, as we go through. So I'm just going to wait for Dove to do that. And Diolch, thank you. All right, here we go. I'm not the world's greatest presenter, so bear with me as I overcome my nerves, but I hope everything I say makes good sense.
Thanks, Donna. And just to say that we're aiming at a 2:30 for you to finish, just to give you an idea.
I might be out here in 5 minutes. You never know. It depends what the nerves are like. Okay, so hello. As Sue kindly introduced me, I'm Donna Coyle, and I've been asked to share information with you about a current project that is pushing forward with a collaborative solution to social care. So to confirm, before I really get stuck in, Compass is a Wales-based development agency working for positive change. We are cooperative, and our focus is on building a fairer, greener economy and a more equal society. And as Sue rightly said, we were known as the Wales Cooperative Centre until last April, so it's been almost 11 months now. In the project that I'm going to talk to you about, the collaboration is amongst the community and as well outwardly with organisations drawn from the private, public and third sectors. The project, though, is led by communities, and our role is to offer support and facilitation to make things happen. It is our aim, with the community in the lead, whisking up many collaborative arrangements and endeavours, that we will find a solution to the entrenched social care issues. Issues? Well, really, it's the current system of social care. It's its design, delivery and purpose. As I said, I'm not going to talk for long, as I'd rather have a discussion with you once I've told you more about the project. However, there is much to share and the slides are busy, but they will be available after today's event for you to review and digest at a more leisurely pace. Thank you. Okay, slide 2, please. So our project is called Community-Led Care, Solutions to Social Care Issues, and it is funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. Our project partners are ACE, which stands for Action in Caira and Ely, which is a community development organisation based in southwest Cardiff. And our other partner is PABS, the Pembrokeshire Association of Voluntary Services. The lottery has funded us to test with and learn from our communities what social care would look like with them in the lead, and to understand how it would be different from what they would aim to achieve. We are testing the rural community approach against the city community approach, with ACE Cares working in 2 neighbouring communities in the Welsh capital, and with Preseli Cares working with 2 distinct communities in North East Pembrokeshire, one in Newport on the coast, and the other in Crymych by the Preseli Hills. ACE Cares and Preseli Cares are the names given to our on-the-ground community collaborations. We're only 7 months into this project. It's a 2-year project, it's going to go quick, and we didn't start with a set of answers that we wanted to test. This is all about people in the community collaborating to find their own answers. Slide 3, please. Thank you. So a brief background note. This project, Community-Led Care project, builds on an earlier project from Compass, which was funded by Welsh Government. And it was funded to help realise the government's vision set out in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act for more sustainable, outcomes-focused services. And the project was called Care to Cooperate. Through Care to Cooperate, we aim to develop social care cooperatives and social enterprises with a multitude of stakeholders, including citizens, families, community groups, care workers, third sector organisations, and commissioners from local authorities and health boards. The development of cooperatives and social enterprise would transform services in line with policy objectives, resulting in social care organisations owned by communities and serving local communities. This map tries to do a summary roundup of some of the projects that we worked with during Care to Cooperate. I'm just going to highlight a few. So the top one there is Conwy. It's a Conwy Deaf Translation and Support Services. And this was a group of people come together to provide services for themselves and for other members of their local deaf community, helping with everyday life because their language, their first language is BSL, so British Sign Language, but often business and everyday life is done through the spoken Welsh or spoken English, and it became a real challenge for them. So it was a community coming together to respond to issues that nobody else could understand and for them to respond and support each other. Flintshire Do It is an inclusive community-wide group that just gets on and does things together. It breaks down barriers and builds mutual support and resourcefulness. Gorwelian Nath, a different approach to re-ablement for community members, and it isn't based on a 6-week programme, but focuses on the whole person and welcomes that person's ongoing contribution to help others while continuing to help themselves. And finally, I'm going to pick out Friends United Together, who took a bold decision to step out of a commissioned supported living service and to work together to secure direct payments from the local authority so that they could pull them together to arrange their own support services. So lots of good stuff was achieved by smaller groups, but really we had no real impact on the social care system. We found that people wanted much more of a say over activities that help them to live good lives, and they can articulate what those activities are. To change the system, people have to be in the lead and have control over their care and support. Over to slide 4, please. So returning now to our current project, Community-Led Care Solutions for Social Care Issues. What do we mean by community-led care? Well, based on the research we undertook to inform the project proposal, here on screen you can read the 2 different approaches that the communities are testing. In Cardiff, ACE Cares wants to try a more interdependent approach to care and wellbeing, bringing people's personal assets and strengths together with assets in the community to build supportive ties and bonds to experience a best shared life. In North East Pembrokeshire, Preseli Cares is taking a cooperative approach, working across the community and sectors, aiming to join up and make sense of care and support available and transform services to be based on cooperative principles of parity and equity and equality. Domiciliary care is one of the issue service areas that Preseli Cares is addressing, but not the only one. On to slide 5, please. Now I'll share our reflections on the first 7 months of the project, what we've learned quickly and how this knowledge and experience is directing our approach. We are always reflecting and acting on those reflections. And again, apologies for so many words on the screen. Okay, 1, public sector and third sector providers often work under commissions and contracts. Often, third sector contracted to the public sector and the public sector, commissioning its own services. And that leads to an offer of services that people can access. And if those services work, such as a social care service, then that's fab for the person accessing it. But if it doesn't work, then there seems to be no alternative further conversation or consideration of other options. It just sort of grinds to a halt. Our second reflection is that we really must listen and hear and reflect to understand what's making a difference for people's lives around their social care. And we have to work hard to listen to more people and more community groups to hear a broad and diverse range of voices. And 3, our role is to amplify community voices to secure transformational change in social care that so many people desire. Next slide, please. I've been asked to consider the enablers, the things that are helping this project progress, and also to consider the challenges that we must deal with. The things that make this project possible are collaboration. As I described at the start, collaboration is rich and far-reaching amongst the project partners, amongst the communities, and across sectors. Each partner has a different complementary role to play, and together we are able to influence and input at the hyperlocal level through to the national policy level. I've never quite worked like this, and it's really exciting, and I think we're onto something. The way we facilitate is very different because it's building collaboration vertically and horizontally in a way I've not experienced before. But again, I think we're onto something here. It's about also the capacity of people and communities to help themselves. And we're all emboldened by the response of people and communities during the pandemic. And how do we build on that? And finally, asset mapping. We really want to do this differently. We really want to understand a community, how it works, who's involved, and how it could be more inclusive. So they are definitely the things that are helping this project progress. These are our enablers. Slide 7, please. Interestingly, the things that are helping our project progress can ironically also prove to be our challenges. So asset mapping, again, that different approach that's required in our quest to know more and understand more about communities is a real challenge. How do we keep doing it? How do we go deeper? How do we find out more? How do we ask the right questions? We've acknowledged, and I think many projects do, that often it's the same people from the community who step up to take a lead. But how do we move around this to support more people to join us and to take the lead or to share that lead? And that's something we're addressing now. And actually, with the spring months coming towards us, it may well be that our project starts to flourish outside of those traditional office hours. 3, we need to create a movement. We need a collaborative movement of people and communities to take forward their solutions to social care. I'm going to leave that with you at the moment and return to this at the end of my presentation. And finally, on this slide, everyone can contribute. They can give, support, receive, benefit, grow, and in doing so, lift their own well-being, and then do it again and do more. The challenge is to show that doing the little things in a collaborative way really reaps big rewards. And nobody should be ashamed or fearful that only doing little things isn't enough. It truly is. The next slide, please. And now to more details about each community-led project. Firstly, Priscilla Cares. So in North East Pembrokeshire, the development officer is Jo Hobson, who's on the call today, and she's facilitating 5 activity streams co-created by the communities of Newport and Crummock. In Crummock, the focus is on creating a mixed economy of care providers and working with young people now and in the future to rethink career opportunities in a different care system. In Newport, hyper-local working is testing a community circle of support, bringing collaborative efforts around people, accepting and welcoming that people can give. And together, Crummock and Newport, and this is a really meaty one, we are ambitious, are exploring approaches and models for housing adaptations and co-housing that will provide companionship by its very nature, informal care and support to address isolation and loneliness and to provide help on hand that isn't a paid help, that's a community help. A quick question for you to consider while I continue with the presentation. Is this what you would have expected from community-led care? Next slide, please. I've included a selection of quotes from community members to evidence the new approach. I think most striking for me is the first one about people's actual experience living in a community. It can be markedly different to the people just a street away. So communities are not a homogeneous whole, but as someone described the other day, like an ocean where there are thousands and millions of drops that make up the whole. The quotes support the challenges we face in facilitating community-led care, but also strongly support the opportunities. Not to give up, how decisions are made, and that solutions should emerge from the community. Next slide, please. And now to ACE Cares and its best shared life approach, illustrated through its new Carers Club. Development Officer Rachel Hart, also on the call today, has facilitated the launch of Carers Club. It has given unpaid carers a space where they can express their frustrations about daily life as a carer, but also where they can pool their collective experiences into providing solutions for each other. The collaborative space fosters their well-being. The informality of the group is attractive to like-minded carers, and together they share a commitment and enthusiasm to put community in the lead, to co-create better care and support. Working together as real people and a community to find their own solutions, unpaid carers are willing to participate as they haven't before. Having a voice and being heard and being listened to is working to shape new services for the people they care for. And importantly, as unpaid carers, the club is beginning to mitigate their loneliness and isolation. Next slide, please. I want to finish on that desire, even requirement, to build a movement which is collaboration at its best. So in 2018, we made a very short film that brought people together who wanted to build a cooperative social care sector. This, for me, was the start of a movement that in 2023, we need to re-embrace and continue to build. People and communities wish to feel part of something that will grow and sustain, something that is bigger than us and will attract others to join. We want communities to be proud of what they're achieving, the transformative change that is underway, and to bring it all together in a movement for community-led care. I'm going to play a few minutes of a film in the hope that you'll agree that talking about a movement is to talk about a collaborative solution to social care. And we can build a community-led care movement for Wales. Thank you. The final slide is just my contact details, but again, that will be circulated, and I just wanted to welcome more in-depth and lengthier conversations with anybody at any time. So just to say thank you and diolch, and now I'm going to share my screen.
Every day, over 150,000 people receive social care in Wales. Our elderly grandparents, our children, our vulnerable adults, all of them rely on the care they receive to live their lives to the full. Social care matters to us all. We all have a stake in the future of our social care system. The current care system is based upon market competition, but in order to make sure that we have a care sector that empowers people to achieve their full potential, we need to move to a system based on cooperation.
If we want a very different care sector in Wales, the way forward is to use cooperatives. Cooperatives give people a voice by bringing people closer together to provide better care and support for people in our communities.
Care cooperatives can be owned and controlled by the people they support, as well as their friends, family, professional carers, and community. They are based on values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. Members have an equal voice in the way the co-op is run. In the care sector, this model benefits everybody involved. It creates a care system where people come first.
So in a care system that's focused on people, the people being cared for are the experts in their lives. The people who are providing care are the experts in giving care to those people. Whether you're the person being cared for or you're a carer, you're working together to get the best out of that situation so individuals can flourish and grow.
I think as a community and as a society, it's right to do right by people and give them a voice and a choice in what happens to them.
Care delivered cooperatively is driven by the needs of the people receiving care and their families. This means it often doesn't look like care as it's normally understood. Cartrefi Cymru's members decided that it was important that they had chances to socialise.
Being a cooperative in the care sector is amazing because it just gives everyone a voice. We are supporting people how they want to be supported. Everyone's happy because they're doing what they want to do.
We really need to appreciate people who care for others, both as unpaid carers and as a profession. They do an amazing job that not many people could do because it's just so giving.
In cooperatives, the people working on the front line of care would have a say in how their jobs should be done. As caregivers, they are ideally placed to suggest improvements. Across all sectors, workers in cooperatives see improved conditions, pay, and job satisfaction.
We want to have the care service as a career of first choice for people, where people are respected for the work that they do, they have opportunities to progress, and that we as a society fundamentally think these people are doing essential work to make our communities work.
For people that care for their loved ones, cooperatives offer a way to create a support network and to amplify their voice in the conversation around the future of care.
For me as a parent, if I was able to shape where Aled was able to go, I would feel comfortable and happy knowing that he was safe in a well cared for environment and happy to go into that environment. As a parent of a child with additional learning needs, it's a 24-hour job. So therefore, it would be really helpful if Aled could go to an environment that was nurturing and safe, and where we as parents could get support from other parents.
I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you very much for your time and your attention today. Thank you.
And I'm delighted to introduce to you Tim Crayhart. Tim is from Shared Lives Plus, and he's there on screen. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
I think Tim is going to be joined by a home share ambassador, if Emma is around. But I'm going to, there she is, there's Emma. Great to see you, Emma. So I'm going to hand over to Tim now, who's going to tell you about home share. And very interesting that one of the key things that has come up from the communities in North East Pembrokeshire is the issue about housing and support. And I think home share could be a great solution, a great opportunity in that context. So I'm going to hand over, give you 20 minutes. You're the last presenters between us and a cup of tea. So 20 minutes is what you've got. And over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Yes, so this presentation, it's going to be a presentation of two halves. So the first will be, I'm going to try and stick to 10 minutes to me talking about home share, where we're at in Wales, and then 10 minutes in, I'm going to bring Emma in as somebody with lived experience to be able to talk about her experience of being in a home share match. And I'm not too big to admit that that's the most interesting bit of the presentation. So we'll get through the PowerPoint first, and then we'll come to Emma. So I believe that the screen is going to be shared with the magic of technology. Fantastic, thank you very much, Dr. Marianne. So what is home share? I'm going to take you through, if we could go to the first slide. Just very quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's needed, exactly what is home share, where it's come from, how long it's been around, what's the mechanics of it, how does it actually work in practice, talk about the home share programs that we now have in Wales, and a little bit about the organisation that I work for. So if we could have the next slide. So the background to why we need home share is all the things that are listed above, and there's no surprises here. I won't go into detail. We know that there's a social care crisis, lack of staff. We know that house prices, housing demand, rent prices has gone up. We know in particular areas it's incredibly difficult for particularly young people to get on the housing ladder. We also mix that in with more recently the cost of living crisis as well. well. It's more and more difficult for people to afford to live, and particularly living on their own. And then you add into that mix older people who are living alone and the impact that has on their lives. We know that people suffering with loneliness and isolation, it's the same health impact as smoking. It has a terrible physical impact as well as psychological and emotional impact. So those are a whole raft of issues. So how on earth does one programme try to meet all of those issues? Well, if we have the next slide, I'll start to take you through it. So, well, what is home share and how can it help to meet some of those needs? So home share is where you have an older person generally living on their own, that's got a spare room, that really will benefit from some company, some support, and some low-level help around the house. So we're not talking any care, but we're talking about, you know, cooking, cleaning, gardening, taking the dog for a walk, doing a bit of shopping, lifts into town, that kind of thing. So low-level support, and having meals together, watching TV together, that companionship and friendship that comes with that as well. So they're in need of that, and then they're matched up with a home sharer, a younger person in general, who will come in and they will provide that support that they need. So for them, they get affordable, safe accommodation, maybe in an area where it would be impossible for them to do so. So they're able to get that safe accommodation, that safe place to live, and for that benefit, they are able to provide that low-level support, that companionship, that friendship to the older person. So the great thing about this model is it's not one person giving and one person receiving either way. It's both giving and both receiving. So the older person is able to open up their home and provide a safe accommodation, and the younger person is able to come in, benefit from that, and be able to provide that support and that friendship and that companionship to that older person. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll talk very quickly about the history of it. Often if people haven't heard of it, they think it's some kind of newfangled, wacky idea that somebody's just plucked out of the air. Well, actually, it's as old as me. It started in 1972, which is when I started as well. So it was the idea was developed in America. So Maggie Kuhn, who started the Grey Panthers older people activist group, first came up with the idea for having a home share way back in 1972. So it started there. Then in the early 80s, it was picked up by Nan Maitland in the UK, who was an occupational therapist, and she saw the benefits of older people and younger people sharing their homes together, sharing their lives together, and all the additional benefits that comes along with it. So it's been in the UK for a while. It started to grow, particularly in the early 2000s, when more providers became aware of the model and wanted to get on board. So that's when we, as an organisation, first got involved. So as Shared Lives Plus, under a different moniker then, was approached by the provider saying, we want a network of home share deliverers. Can you help facilitate that? So we got involved then. And then in 2015, we were able to expand that further, and we launched under the banner of Home Share UK. So if we could go to the next slide. So, well, how does it work? So the really major part of it is matching the right people together. It's finding the right person for the right person. So obviously it's not the first two people that you come across are going to necessarily work. It's about brokering that relationship and monitoring it and supporting it. I can see I've left one of the particular providers in there, which I'll come to that later on. So that is a big part of it. So the home sharer agrees to that low-level support, so 10 hours of support. There's no personal care involved. It can sit alongside a personal care package, but it's really important that the home sharer doesn't deliver any any personal care. But it's about creating that good match. It's about finding people that are going to enjoy living together, that maybe have got similar interests, maybe similar outlooks, and they're able to enjoy each other's company and live well together. So the home sharers aren't charged rent, but they do agree to pay towards utilities, to pay towards the living costs, and each party do pay a fee towards the home share provider to be a part of the programme. And as you can imagine, both participants will be assessed to make sure they're suitable to be involved. So if we could have the next slide, please. So the matching process is somebody would contact their local coordinator, say they want to be involved. There'll be an application and an interview just to make sure people are motivated for the right reasons, that the younger person isn't just looking for somewhere cheap to live and doesn't really want to do the support, and likewise that the older person just doesn't want somebody that's a living cleaner, that they want somebody to share their time with. So it's important that those motivations are found out, so so you have chances to meet each other, match them together, then they sit down and draw up an agreement, so both know what they're agreeing to, and they also will have a trial period, which might be a month, to check that everything's going well, and they'll get ongoing support from their local coordinator. If we can have the next slide. So as you can imagine, safeguarding is a massive part of this. We have, as Home Share UK, we provide a good practice guide. We've got a quality assurance framework to ensure that home share deliverers are working safely, that they're working effectively, that they are prioritising safeguarding. That we check that home sharers and householders are suitable to take part, and we do that through the interviews, through meeting them. DBS checks take place, reference checks as well. We always try to involve the family particularly of the householder, to make sure they understand what it's all about and that they're comfortable and happy with it as well. And then there's the ongoing support provided by the coordinator, so in-person visits, telephone calls, checking that everything's going well. If we can have the next slide. So in Wales, we've been really fortunate that the Welsh Government has funded Shared Lives Plus for 3 years to develop 3 pilots and to get them up and running. So we don't deliver those programs ourselves. We work with other providers, and that haven't been able to have that support from the Welsh Government to do that, which is absolutely fantastic. And if we can go to the next slide, I can tell you who they are. So we've a program in Swansea, which is run by SCVS, and that's Shared Homes Swansea. We have Pembrokeshire Home Share, which is run by the Pembrokeshire Care Society. And interestingly, I know they are linked in with Preseli Cares, because Dean, our coordinator, talks about that a lot. And our last programme to launch is Racheni Cartref Gwynedd. It's Gwynedd Home Share, which is run by Cyngor Gwynedd, the local authority, which is really great, because they're 3 very different organisations running those programmes. Time is slipping ahead, so I'm gonna skip the next slides, which is just talking about us as an organisation, and I think if we can just go through to me and Emma, I think we can get to hear more of what it's actually all about from somebody with lived experience of it. So hello, Emma.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I can. It's good to see you again. Me and Emma have done this many times. It's
yeah.
It's great to hear from them. So, wasting no time, it'd be great if you could start by telling us what led to you to begin home sharing.
Yes, so I started off looking for something for my daughter. She went to university and unfortunately didn't deal very well with the university accommodation. coming and going, and was looking for more of a homely experience. And I happened to come across the home share, and she was the first home share for Gloucestershire, and she was with Barbara, a lovely lady, and they had a fantastic relationship. Georgina felt safe and secure and happy there, and it was just brilliant to see them both smiling. It was fantastic.
And how did you get pulled into that then?
Well, we were living abroad in Spain, and my daughter needed to come back for university, and I had a younger daughter as well, so we needed to come back. With obviously Brexit, we couldn't sell the house, so I needed to come back and support them. So I then got involved with home share, and actually both of us ended up living with Barbara, and sharing her wonderful house, and meeting her daughter, Dee, who we still meet. I meet regularly every month, have coffee. And I joined in, and there was the two of us in the home share helping Barbara, and it was fantastic. It was great.
Yeah, and it's great to a good evidence of how flexible the model is, that we often think of individuals living with individuals, but it can be couples, or it can be two different people living as well.
Definitely, and it works quite well with the two, because if you're out at work at different times, then there's always somebody around to help, someone to take appointments, you know, and things, and be around and just help and be there and support the family and Barbara herself. So yes, you don't just have to be, you know, just one person. You don't have to be any particular age, young, old. Anybody can actually do it. It's a win-win for anybody who's looking for that.
Absolutely. And back at the beginning, did you feel worried at all about starting home share, about moving in with somebody that maybe you didn't know so well?
Yes, you're bound to be a little bit nervous, because you don't know what it's going to be like, but you have a meeting where you meet them and you chat to them, and you find out what they would actually like you to do in their house. You know, you have a checklist that you can go through and ask, you know, what suggestions, what help would you like? Because I've done 4 home share nows, and each of them are all different. Some of them would like different support in different areas, and you sit down and you come to agreement. You talk about, you know, things that they would like help with. You know, there's all sorts. It's the same as in any type of relationship, isn't it? You're finding your boundaries. You're there to help them, but not overstep the mark, and just, you know, just settle in, and just everybody helping each other.
Yeah, which feeds very nicely into the next question. So how has home sharing helped the older people that you've lived with? What kind of support have you given them, and the benefits from it?
Oh, they've just felt absolutely great. They said that when they hear that key coming in the door, they just feel safe. There's a sense of relief that they're not on their own, especially overnight, because for older people, you know, the night times are the times they're tired by the end of the day. You know, they're more liable possibly to fall, or, you know, they want help making sure that the house is all locked up. They feel safe and secure, and their families feel safe and secure, knowing that someone is there with them, so that if anything does happen, you can give someone a call. You know, you're there for support and help, and sit down, watch the telly, have a good chat, ask how your day's been, and it's just the companionship that they like. They just feel so much relief and happy, and they're secure, and they're in their own home, and that's what they want to do. They want to stay in their own home, and this allows them to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. And you mentioned earlier about Dee, who was the daughter of the first householder that you were with.
Yes.
So what kind of benefits does it bring to family members then, knowing that there's a home sharer there?
Well, yes, well, they feel happy and supported, because they know that their parents have companionship there. So there was someone there to help and support them if they have any concerns or worries, or if there's any issues in the house. Then, you know, you can report those back to them, and get things sorted, issues, helping out, telephone calls, helping them. I used to help Joyce, the last lady that I lived with, get onto her Skype. So she used to Skype her family 3 times a week, because they lived quite far away. So helping with computer issues, ordering stuff for them, doctor's appointments. And so for the family, they're comfortable in the knowledge, knowing that their parents have the help there should they need it. And that's important for them, because then they're not having to rush backwards and forwards all the time, or panic and worry, is my parent going to be okay? It's just that relief of having somebody there.
Yeah. And how has home sharing helped you personally as a home sharer?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I've learned so much, have some fantastic stories and wonderful outings, you know, with them, and go off and do amazing things, and just chatting. And it's just a companionship, not only for them, but for you. You're not coming back somewhere where it's completely empty flat all on your own. You know, there's someone there who's happy to see you, asking how your day are, you're asking how their day is. You share stories and all sorts of different things. So it's just character building as well. And you feel like you're helping someone and you're doing good, and they're giving that back to you as well. So it's a win-win for both.
Fantastic, which I know is something that you've told me many times. It is a win-win, and I think that really does add into the fact that it's a giving and receiving model.
Yes.
It's not one way or another. So I know I've just had the message from Sue that we need to wrap up. So,
okay.
Thank you very much for that, Emma. Thank you for joining me once again.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for allowing me to give this presentation as well to you all. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Mike is from the National Development Team for Inclusion, so one of our sort of with a national perspective on things. And I'm going to hand over to Mike for the last 20 minutes. I'll ask you to keep an eye on the time, Mike, because we'll then pulling the session to a close.
I'm sorry to ask, apparently my screen sharing isn't working because of the settings on my machine. I wouldn't.
No problem, Mike. I've got it.
Yeah, you're a superstar. Thank you very much indeed. Braces. Look at that, beautiful. Well, first of all, thank you ever so much for the invite. Second of all, I've used Google Translate, so I won't tell you which way around I did it, but you can probably guess. I'm delighted to talk to you about value and impact of communities. Can you just move on one slide, please? Just back. That'll do me nicely. So who are we? What are we? National Development Team for Inclusion it's a not-for-profit organisation. It works across the UK from the tip of the Shetland Isles down to the edge of Torbay. We have had some engagement in Wales. It's a network of learning that's come over 7 years from over 30 sites now. It's about and I'm hoping that what I tell you today will be an example of kind of what happens when brave leaders and innovative staff meet communities who are active and engaged, and they want to do something different. So we've talked about that today. We've talked at great length to say, what do you need to make it do? And sometimes you need those brave people and you need those committed individuals, but goodness me, they can really make a difference. And I'm in the privileged position to be able to tell you about that difference on behalf of those local authorities that are highlighted on their map. So can we move on slide, please? Okay. This interesting. What I think we were wrestling with a problem within adult social care, particularly at the first entry to adult social care. Now, imagine, if you will, that something in your life is not going the way that you want, and you're concerned. You feel like maybe you're at the edge of crisis, and you might go and see your GP or your pharmacist or a friend or somebody, and they say, you know what you need to do? Get yourself down to the council and get yourself some adult social care, or why don't you get yourself an assessment? And what was happening for many people is they were taking that advice and they were ringing these local authorities, and they're still doing it today, by the way, across the land, everywhere, ringing up, and they were receiving a kind of, well, there might be eligibility issues, there's a bit of a waiting list before we'll get there in the end. And this picture represents a kind of a rethinking of the art, or maybe even the craft of the possible. How might that be different? And in those local authorities, and particularly back before I joined the organisation, I was a transformation manager doing this particular work in one of those local authorities. we met with the people who were on some staggeringly long waiting lists, and we asked them about what it was that prompted them to call, what it was they expected, even actually down to what did they think adult social care was? Because in truth, some of the characterizations of what this would do and what it was harked back to the kind of the late 70s, maybe even a bit earlier. So having good conversations with them opened up opportunities, new possible ways of doing it. And one of the way that it manifested itself, the community-led support project that's been running for 7 years, one of the first ways it's manifested itself, it's not the only way it manifests itself, but one of the first ways it did so was to try and have that conversation in a different place for a number of reasons. Having it in the community makes the community real. It makes it part of the actual original conversation. You're not having it in a local authority building with a power balance of computer says no, assessment says yes, that kind of stuff. It brought people into spaces and places. They started off as places to talk pre-pandemic. They end up as spaces to talk. They could be online or anything. And they were an opportunity to bring in a wider group of people from voluntary community faith organizations, colleagues from housing, people from some of them existed in hospitals, some of them in schools or in GP surgeries, anywhere and everywhere. The community said, this is easy to get to, and this is where I'd like to start this journey. That's where they will happen. And the conversation was opened into looking at potential solutions and what was wrong. Now, I don't have a lot of time, and you'd think it's foolish for me to talk about an ice cream factory when I don't have a lot of time, but I am going to, because I met an interesting chap this weekend on a bus to go and see a football match. And we were talking about some of this process, and he was a clinical psychologist working in health, and we were discussing some of the issues. And we were talking about a model that makes space to talk to and understand the situation that people find themselves in. And he said, I liken it to an ice cream factory. And I thought, right, I'll strap myself in for this, and I'm not entirely sure where this illusion is going to. He said, imagine that in the community, there's a lot of hungry people, and people are saying, you know what you want to do, you know where they got food, get yourself down the ice cream factory. He said, and you get people turning up day after day, and you know what will happen is 9 out of 10 of those people will go away with an ice cream. But what you need to do, if you stopped and you just asked some simple question, like, for example, what would you like? What do you fancy? What is it that what would satisfy you? What would improve things for you? And if they said something hot or something savory, I can guarantee those people are going to go away with something different. And that's kind of at the heart of this. I mean, it's a daft analogy, I suppose, but I really quite like the idea of running an ice cream factory, B, having it as an analogy for social care. But when you talk to people about what it is that might make things better or might resolve the situation, it's not often a 13-week wait and an assessment and a package of care. It can be different. Dev, can we just move on a slide, please? I'm going to talk to you about how different those things can be. All right, then. So I've got lots to talk to you about. I've got a few things here, but let's say an average waiting time. And I don't know whether people are familiar on this call with what your waiting list might be, from services to delivery of services, but 13 weeks was not an uncommon theme. Now, it might have been we'd gone in some tricky places, but goodness me, 13 weeks waiting. Get that down. When you have these conversations in community places, don't recreate them. Find what's there. Go and stand on the shoulders of your voluntary community colleagues if they're there. If they're running something successful, if it's accessible and if it's available, that's a great place to start, if nothing else. We got those waiting times down from 13 weeks to 9 days. I'll tell you why that's important. If you say the cavalry's coming in 13 weeks, whatever it is that is concerning them will probably occur sometime in that week. If you have data specialists in social care teams, look at those waiting lists. Find out how many people leave that waiting list because something bad has happened. About 8 weeks in, we found if people were asking for help at week 1, by week 8, whatever it was they were concerned about had happened, and they either were in hospital or they were in another service because we were keeping them waiting. Another kind of sidetrack is the complaints. The second one down, my grumpy face is meant to represent complaints. local authority, example, 600 plus complaints per annum, with the theme, lack of action. Well, you can imagine you got 13-week waiting lists, and that's just to get in the door. That's not even for the care. That's not even for meeting the right team. But we got that by having the conversation and seeing what was available and starting that journey quickly. We got that down to less than 10. 600 to less than 10. Now, I'm going to tell you, I bet you love it when you get an email saying there's been a complaint, we need to respond. That's probably at a conservative estimate, 3 hours of your time. Well, imagine what that does for an organization that can, by doing the right thing, can take that kind of pressure out of the system. Okay, so back to our ice cream factory illusion. I suppose we've got 53% here, which is the increase in the number of people who went on to receive something other than formal support. But I'm going to take the stat away from this. I'm going to talk about it in real life. For every 10 people who made the initial contact with adult social care in the year before this started, 7 of them received some method of formal care, stroke, had an ice cream. Now, when we started the conversational approach that sought to work out what was going on and what might be available, and in concert and hand in glove with our communities, that dropped down to just over 3 of those 10 had to continue their journey into social care. The others went away. They walked away and they were happy to. They maintained 97% satisfaction rate, from 600 complaints here to 97% satisfaction rate, and they still walked away. Generally, they said, well, look, it's easy to come and talk to you. I will do what you suggest. I will try and resolve it. I will make the contact, or you can help me make my contacts in the community. And if things get worse and if things do get bad, I'll come back. I will come back because I know that it's easy. Now, imagine the same conversation. You waited 13 weeks for that conversation. You're not leaving that queue because you cannot afford to wait another 13 weeks. So it freed up loads of availability. And the final point was around the actual care that we gave. So for some people, it is absolutely the right thing to move into social care. But do not forget that communities, that resilience and connection of community should stay with people throughout that journey. Keep them connected, keep them safe and well, keep the eyes on them, keep them connected to their communities, because people who are safe and well draw less on the public purse. So we're talking about doing the right thing firstly, but seeing the benefits. And our case studies time after time were suggesting that we're a lower rate of formal care used in the initial package of care, and over the years where outcomes were a priority, that the care didn't escalate through crisis or over or under provision, because the community was there guiding and supporting that person alongside. They worked together, they made each other stronger. Health, supporting well-being, supporting health. Dev, can we move on one more slide, please? Okay, now these are English stats because the English data is available, and obviously a lot of our sites are in English. So one of the pieces of work, again, I'm hoping that in the chat, I'll put the 2 links to my larger value report, but also to this observable impacts report. Three graphs here that sites in our network who were working in this way, who made the voluntary and community options hand in glove, part and parcel of any package of care, if it needed to be. Then when people reporting back about choice, control, quality of life, and social contact, it continued to rise for those groups when you compared it to the other groups across the nation. Okay, can we move on? I don't have a lot of time to talk to you, so I'm keeping going. Finally, okay, so case studies, which has been the bread and butter of preventative work. I'm going to name check Laura's superb presentation earlier, Laura Charlesworth, and she said about community power. We really have a problem with counting things that don't happen. When you're in a preventative mode, things that don't happen are difficult to count because they're not there to count. So we do often fall back on telling tales and telling stories, but the group of stories that we're collecting constantly, this is just a selection of them that we published, but constant looking at based on the professionals involved, the social care staff, the GP, the hospital staff, when they said what was going to happen and what went on when we changed the nature of the intervention, when we changed the nature of the conversation. And we got 13 here. Now, I did a quick tally on this, but on average, by going through the full conversation, by identifying the community and voluntary assets that were there to be put in place, that just was inventive and innovative and did things different and took a little bit of risk where it was afforded and it was appropriate, the average cost avoidance, I won't say savings, I'm not going to lead you to believe you can whip this money out of the system, but the avoided cost in these people's lives in terms of the public purse, on average of £43,000 per person. And these are not cherry-picked cases. Some of them are as low as 400, some of them are up in the hundreds of thousands. But it's an amazing the way the person that you see can inform the work that you will do. And finally, on to my last slide, something here just to say, it's communities doing this. It's not me. I'm telling you a story, and I'm very proud and privileged to be able to tell you that story. But it's communities, it's people, it's staff, frontline staff, who are brave enough to have a different kind of conversation and to get into the nitty-gritty with people. And I would say this, Margaret Mead, as a cultural anthropologist of the 20th century, I just finished on that quote, and I would say, I am privileged to work with these people, and I'm pleased to be invited to this conference with similar-minded people. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. The last slide, please. Thank you very much. That's me. And again, Google Translate was involved. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Okay, I'm going to now just move on to the final speaker.